There are snapshots in time that you remember that show and the extraordinary impact Leslie had on individuals and on the world. And I was lucky enough to be present for some of those moments. And looking back, I could see the ripples that they caused, these moments in time. I met Leslie at a women's martial arts special training event. There used to be annual special training, and they probably still are. And it was like 1986, I think. It was 1986, I think, and Judy Greenspan introduced me to her. I wasn't in the party then, and I remember that moment really clearly because Leslie was so warm and outgoing, and she had that way of making you just feel so special just to meet her. And I remember too, this was before Leslie had written any books, before there was a transgender liberation movement, and there was some backwardness in the women's community. And there was a woman in our school, and on the way home, driving in the car, she made some comment about Leslie and the way she looked, and she was critical, like she should look more like how she would define as a woman. So it was clear to everybody. And Leslie, Judy and I argued with her, but she was really intransigent about it. And then a few years later, in 1992, Leslie produced the slideshow documenting the history of transgender people. And I was living in Washington, D.C. then, and the branch there organized her to present the slideshow there. And a huge crowd showed up, and it was riveting. The slideshow was spellbinding. And it was unforgettable, and it was the predecessor to her books, Transgender Warrior and Trans-Liberation. And Leslie gave that slideshow in a lot of cities, but DC was the most important because in the audience, Minnie Bruce was in the audience, and Leslie noticed her. She was, really mesmerized by her. And Leslie was staying at my apartment, and the next day she said, I have to call her. And so she found her number. I think she looked it up in the phone book, and she called her and made arrangements to meet. And they met, and they stayed together for the next 22 years. And Leslie came back to DC the following year in 1993 when Stone Butch Blues came out, and the Washington DC branch organized, we organized an event for her, and it was amazing. I mean, the women's community came out. It was a huge crowd. And one thing that's memorable about that is the woman who, in the car coming back from special training, she was in the audience. And another thing that I remember about that book signing thing is before, I was staffing the table before, and on the table was Bob McCubbin's landmark book, The History of Lesbian and Gay Oppression. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was called The Gay Question, but the title had just been changed, I think like just months before that event. And a woman was, came to the table and picked up the book, and she made some comment about some passage, and Leslie overheard her and said, oh, isn't it funny how the words we use to describe things change over time? And the woman turned and looked at Leslie, looked her up and down and said, who are you, Bob McCubbin? And she said, no, I'm Leslie Feinberg. And the woman was really appalled, but she was just horrified at what she'd done. And it just was an instance of Leslie changing someone, and she changed everybody who she met, and with her energy, her warmth, her political sharpness, and unwavering commitment to communism. And I'm so glad to have known her. Thanks.